don't know what a hot flash
No, I
is.
don't have. Nor will I.
Yeah, you never know.
Don't judge.
Trying.
Never know. Well, you might.
You're live now, too.
Okay, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Tuesday, April 8th. I don't see the live up there.
It's on the side.
Oh, it's on the other side. Oh, I got moved.
Oh, it's.
Okay, anyway, it's April 8th, Tuesday. It's our first meeting. It's a little bit after 1 o'clock. And we have with us folks from Montpelier, from the Commission on Recovery and Resilience. And this is talking about the Capitol complex and the flood damage that occurred back in 23 and how we're still trying to figure out how to move forward within our Capitol complex. And John Topins is with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the invitation to be here this afternoon, and very much appreciated your welcoming us on the tour last week. Actually, we had a few other commissioners join, and that was really illuminating for us.
Had you been on the tour before?
I had not post flood. I mean, I'd seen some of those spaces in my travels, but not post flood, to really get a sense of just how much work BGS has done to sort of get those buildings back to functionality, but also just that accounting that they've got to do with FEMA of every square foot and inch. It is a huge load that they've got to carry. And so anyway, that was really, really helpful for us.
And what is really difficult, I'm sure it's difficult for you folks here in Montpelier, and you're the executive director of the commission as well. You drive by those buildings and everything looks okay, but there's 4 of them there that are unoccupied, uninhabitable. So you think everything is fine on the outside, and then when you go in, and the other thing, all those buildings are on temporary electrical. It's all temporary. And temporary is turning into almost 2 years here. But at some point, we have to really move all those mechanical systems.
That's right.
So it's a big undertaking.
If it's okay, I'm going to just help you understand where the commission fits into things here for the city of Montpelier. And
Was the commission developed specifically after the 23?
it was. In fact, that's what I want to share with you. Before I do that, I want to also introduce Ben Doyle is here. Ben was really part of the founding of the commission. He's a member of the commission. Ben also is, in his day job, he's the president of Preservation Trust Vermont, and then is a new member of the Montpelier City Council.
I'm starting to regret some life choices.
And then Jillian Turcola is a new member of our staff. She's an AmeriCorps Vista member that just joined our team. So I mean, I don't need to tell you all the inundation we experienced in 2023 was devastating. I was actually away from Vermont, away on family vacation, and rolled back into town essentially 5 days after the flood, and it was a wasteland. And that wasteland extended right from Main Street all the way down here through State Street, all the way to the bridge. And for the citizens, the residents of Montpelier, it really was sort of an existential moment for us. This isn't the first flood we've had, to say the least, right? We had the terrible ice jam flood in 92.
But it didn't go as.
No, it was not quite in the same degree. We had in 2011, actually, folks often, 2011, we think of Tropical Storm Irene, but there also was the May floods in 2011, and we had pretty severe flooding then. The reality is we are built in a vulnerable location here on the Winooski. At the confluence of the Stevens Branch, the North Branch, and the Dog River that comes in just outside of town. And so for Montpelier residents, it was a moment of a sense of real, I would say, fear and concern about what the future of the city looks like. And so what came out of that is, we're really fortunate that Paul Costello, the former executive director of Vermont Council on Rural Development, with the help of the Montpelier Foundation and the City Council, convened a series of 3 community forums And they were huge. Like one was up at Vermont College, one was here at the State House, one was at the high school. And well over 1,000 Montpelier residents participated in those forums. And the clear sense from those forums was that we needed to build a structure, an organizational structure to carry forward with priorities to help our city recover and to really think about how are we going to make this community more resilient to future floods. And so that's what the Montpelier Commission really is there are 16 volunteer members of the commission. It is a phenomenal team of folks. Peter Walk, the executive director of Efficiency Vermont, Allie Richards, Stephanie Smith, who runs the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, Ned Swanberg, who's our floodplain manager. The amount of expertise we have in that room as volunteer commissioners is really second to none. And then the decision was made that they can't just do it as volunteers. Ultimately, they need some staff to carry that work forward. So they hired me to come on as the executive director. I've been on board for about a year now. My background is I was deputy commissioner of Public Service Department. I worked for Congressman Welch for a bunch of years, and then worked for a number of years for the Vermont Council on Rural Development as well. And so for the commission, we have what we call sort of 3 buckets of activity that we're focused on. One is around emergency response, making sure we really have a robust plan for being responsive to future disasters. Another one is really focused on the watershed. Montpelier's fate is determined well beyond our borders because of all of these branches of the Winooski that flow in here. So we understand that we need to really partner with these neighboring communities in terms of floodplain restoration, really giving the room for the river to slow down and spread out before these floodwaters and enter the city. And then a final area of work is what we call an adaptive downtown. We know we're going to flood again here in Montpelier. What do we do to protect this historic downtown? It's the same conversation, honestly, that BGS is having around the Capitol complex, right? We're not going to pick up and move this state capitol and this Capitol complex. So, and we know, sadly, those waters are likely to come up again, given recent precipitation patterns. So what do we do to invest in these buildings to make them more resilient to future flood events? Those are really the 3 areas of work. And I would say, and I feel like, and this maybe goes without saying, but I think it's worth articulating anyway. There is a tremendous shared interest when you think about the state of Vermont and the city of Montpelier when it comes to the health and vitality of our capital. And I feel a little sort of almost sheepish saying that because I'm clearly self-interested. I'm here on behalf of Montpelier. So of course I want to make that case to you, but the reality is this is a destination. Fall foliage season, you spend 10 minutes out there on the State House lawn and you see dozens of people from all over the country coming through this community. Or you think about, as Ben pointed out to me earlier, on Saturday, we had a rally here. There was probably, I don't know how many thousands of people were on that State House lawn on Saturday. That's emblematic of where this capital city fits into the matrix of our state. It's really important for who we are and what our sort of brand is and how we sort of show ourselves off to the rest of the world. I think the other way that we have a shared interest is the same water that inundates our downtown is the water that inundates this Capitol complex, right? That's, again, so obvious you almost don't need to say it. But that means that the work that we're doing around trying to engage neighboring communities in terms of reducing flood levels in Montpelier is actually work that we hope is beneficial to the Capitol complex, just like it's beneficial to our downtown. So we hope that you would think of us as sort of a partner in doing that sort of work. I want to highlight 2 areas of opportunity. I think you've already set the stage in terms of talking about the Capitol complex, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't also talk a little bit about the fact that the federal government has decided that they are going to dispose of the building at 87 State Street, which is our former post office building. And for newer members of the committee, you may not know that there have been, over the course of the last 25 years, repeated efforts to really look into, when you think about Court Street running to the State House, you've got sort of buildings on one side, some residential, lots of offices in old residential buildings on one side. And then on the other side, what you have is that series of parking lots that are below grade along Court Street. The federal building owns one piece of those parking lots. Vermont Mutual Insurance owns another piece. And then finally, the state of Vermont, right, for parking for the pavilion, legislative parking, they own another piece of the parking there. The fact that the federal government has decided to dispose of that federal building and that parking lot, we think presents a huge opportunity to think again, and not from scratch. I know.
Done that.
That is fully the response that I would expect you to have, right?
I was intrigued by it years ago, but it was.
I know, right? But I guess what I would ask you is, if at that time, years ago, the federal building were in the mix and we knew it was about to change hands,
Would have done.
I believe that it probably would have happened.
So maybe tell them what it is.
Well, here's what I would argue. To some degree, I don't know that I can answer that with precision, but what I could imagine, and there are drawings. In fact, I've shared a few documents with the committee of some of the studies. What you could imagine is a shared parking structure that serves the legislature, potentially serves downtown Montpelier, serves Vermont Mutual, right? There is all this need for parking in our downtown. So imagine concentrating that parking in one location. Imagine that parking actually brings courts up to the Court Street grade. And then imagine you put structures, maybe it's commercial, maybe it's housing, frankly, probably housing, given the nature of the conversations we're having in the state and here in Montpelier. That is what we would imagine as possibilities. And so, I mean, maybe just to cut to the chase a little bit, we are in conversation on not in the capital bill, but with the appropriations about funding a study that would really look at the federal building and those adjacent parking lots and really, and again, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. The idea is to build off of the studies that have already been done, because a lot of work has already been done. And I don't want to leave out the federal building itself. That is 70,000 square foot of space that, frankly, people have been in that building recently, and actually the feds did a very good job of sort of stabilizing that building. It's in remarkably good shape. The one thing they haven't addressed is the elevator, but everything else, they have done a very good job of getting that building sort of back into shape. And so there are questions, and we would say opportunities around what happens with the building, but in particular, what happens with the parking adjacent to it.
Is there thoughts on the Montpelier end? And this is more probably for the city, of creating a TIF district around that area that you're thinking the pit, we used to always call it the pit.
The pit, yeah.
Pit, and the parking, and then, because to me, that would be a good match if there was a TIF district. Just identify yourself for the record, please. Just identify.
Ben Doyle.
Yeah.
As John said, I have a bunch of different hats here, including I live 2 blocks that way. But yeah, I think that's a really intriguing possibility. You know, Montpelier is pursuing a growth center designation and ultimately a TIF over the Country Club Road property. But, you know, when I think about this opportunity that John's describing, I think about just this confluence of events, whether it's the flood, COVID, the loss of state workers, you know, and I attended a Montpelier Downtown Business Association meeting last week that was really hard, you know, to hear about how fragile those businesses are. And what that's a long way of saying that this is a singular opportunity to recreate an economic engine in our downtown. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think a TIF district obviously is a great tool to pursue that. But, you know, all of these things are unknown until we have done more research. I think the thing that, frankly, if I could just quickly, the thing that terrifies me is, I don't know how familiar everybody is with the way HUD or the way that BGS or GSA works with disposing of federal building, but first it can go to HUD, then it can go to any other federal agency. Then the state or the municipality has a chance to buy it through negotiated sale. If nobody does that, it goes basically like on GSA's version of eBay, right? And anyone can buy it. And the idea.
Where are they in the process now?
Right now, they are, I believe, winding their way through checking with every federal agency. And it's unlikely that a federal agency is going to pick it up for use. And so what in my day job, as John said, I work for the Preservation Trust of Vermont. We're an organization that works on historic buildings around Vermont to revitalize communities. What I'm really terrified of is literally a white marble clad elephant in the center of our state capitol that somebody has bought on speculation and just sits there.
Just sits there.
And so I think whatever we can do as a community and a state to be proactive and to seize an opportunity like this, and then into just thinking, I don't want to say your thunder, but this idea of like what happens when that possibility is unlocked, you have an opportunity to completely redefine the way the city engages with the river. And all the asphalt along the river, if the parking was concentrated someplace else that provided, frankly, like flood storage down below, it's suddenly you've really have the opportunity to completely transform the city. And rather than going from a capital that's at risk, we become the national model for flood resiliency. And it's a striking opportunity. And I think really the first step is just doing the due diligence on the feasibility work.
So the study that I'm familiar with about the pit and about that was back in the mid to late 90s. And it really was a pretty solid study. So I would hope they would start with that study.
Yeah, we've linked it. I think there's one from 2001. It's very detailed. And it's both a study of the pit, but then there was also a capital district master plan. And those things sort of work in parallel with each other. Yeah, that's right. And so exactly, start from what's already been done as opposed to, and then just to reiterate, I think what Ben is talking about. Ultimately, the other moving piece right now is this conversation with FEMA and the considerations that ultimately you all will weigh in on about what alternative are we going to choose for the restoration of the Capitol complex. And just to state it clearly from the commission's perspective, that all of that asphalt that lines our river, from our perspective, is not the highest and best use of that land. Like, it is essentially, whenever you're talking impervious surface, you're talking, the water just runs right off, as opposed to if we were able to essentially turn that into green stormwater infrastructure, right? Maybe it is what are called flood benches. So we're adding to flood storage capacity. That obviously has flood resilience benefits. I think it would have tremendous aesthetic benefits for our city as well. When you think about coming along on the other side of the river and looking over at the State House, like, we should all be thinking about what the vista is. What is the view shed? Like, having that sea of parking lots sort of like pollute our view as we're looking at this gorgeous golden dome and this beautiful, State House lawn. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could add some green space along that river? I would argue that serves a benefit for the state in a multitude of ways in making this even more attractive as a capital complex, and obviously for the city, because it means this is even a better place to come visit for folks who want to get off the interstate and come to Montpelier. And so and clearly there's an interrelation between these two things, the federal building and that parcel, and the potential for relocating parking. I will say that, sometimes complexity, you can add so much complexity to projects that they just kind of fail. And so we are sensitive to the fact that, boy, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And frankly, BGS has a ton to work through just in terms of their questions around the Capitol complex. So I wouldn't want to leave you with the sense that they have to be married together, because I think that, frankly, could encumber this with too much, on the other hand, we do see some real synergy between the two. And if we can figure out how they do marry together, we feel like that could be realizing the greatest potential in terms of the opportunities.
When you're talking about the view shed, when you're on the other side of the river and looking towards the State House, I mean, you see the back of the buildings and you see the parking lots. How do you envision that being different? Are you thinking of tearing down some buildings? Or are you thinking just putting green space where the parking is?
I mean, I will say, and we all were in, just to take one example, the former Green Mountain Care Board
That
building.
one's going down.
146, to me, that one seems like
That's a,
kind of a no-brainer
yeah.
in terms of, A, it's right on the river, and boy, it's not serving a lot, and there's no historic value.
There's not.
It doesn't seem to me.
But a good park.
But a good park. I mean, and frankly, if you imagine not just that building, but some of the continuous parking lot, that feels like a real opportunity. I would say it's way premature for us to share any further vision. I do think it's worth looking at that Capital District Master Plan from 2000, because it did do some visioning in terms of, and in fact, the parking lot that they spent more time looking at was the one that's behind the Public Service Department,
Mhm.
that's right on Taylor Street. They really did a whole redesign of that to make a beautiful park and kind of an entranceway to the city from that side. But all of that is way more depth than we would be ready to engage in. For us, it's more at the high level of really thinking about how do we repurpose some of those parking.
Are you also in conversation with the Capitol Complex Commission? Because that's another layer here.
It is another layer, and as I understand, we are, we're certainly in conversation with the Montpelier member of that commission. They are relatively dormant at this point, like they haven't been very active. My understanding, I don't want to underplay their importance. They certainly matter with this. My understanding is they really have purview over the aesthetics of the complex as opposed to the function, and there is real aesthetic considerations here for sure. So.
Questions? Sure.
Where's the capital plan from 2000 located? Where could I find that?
It is now, I think I shared, are you seeing it in your,
I'm not even looking.
okay, I shared 3 documents, yes.
All right, great. Thank
It's
you.
been uploaded to the
Oh,
committee.
that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We also included them on if there's any updates.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say,
They've already been, we put in language in the capital bill to include you folks at least to get the updates. If we hear anything from FEMA or how the state moves forward.
One of the questions I have, and maybe you did say this and I wasn't completely following. So the lovely pit over here. I've always said it'd be a great parking garage, a huge parking garage. So are we talking about potentially making that a multi-level parking and then removing parking from the other side and making a green space, maybe lowering it, et cetera, like a trade-off in that nature?
That is what I'm envisioning as a possibility.
Well, yeah, it's a possibility, not.
Yes, right? Like you could imagine a swap essentially
Yeah.
happening where you can relocate some of that parking. And I know there are we really appreciate the relationship we have with Commissioner Manoli and that team. We have sat down with them a couple of times and they feel like real partners in having this conversation, which is really helpful. I know that part of what they've just got to figure out is how much parking do they need in this complex, which is a really complicated, as Ben said, when you think about COVID, remote work, all of the different moving pieces, figuring out just how much parking you have to account for. I think to just articulate what you'll hear from the businesses in downtown, it's just utilization of the space is what's important to them, whether that is for housing, whether that's for state employees, whether that's for whatever private commercial, like dormancy or stagnation is what is really challenging. And so trying to figure out whatever that future is, how to get on that path is important.
Tom, do you have something?
oh, I mean, I can always talk, but I really do appreciate the committee making sure the city and the commission was in the capital bill, because I hope everybody sees that, to some extent, the lives we save may be our own in state government. And we really do need other parties working together every step of the way. And, you feel a bit like frozen with this FEMA process, which could drag 2-3 years, who knows what. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful we have some creative thinking that says, okay, we don't need to just wait for this FEMA process to be done. We can be ready to go with some plans on whatever's on the other side of that. So I'm really happy the commission was able to come in today and share some thoughts there.
One example of that is on the city council agenda for Wednesday's meeting is a set of hazard mitigation grant program projects. One of which is removal of the dam over by Shaw's grocery store. Getting rid of that dam actually helps in terms of flood reduction levels. We're also working on a floodplain restoration project behind the Agway at a parcel called 5 Home Farm Way. Again, all of those projects really do contribute. And so we do have to think creatively about what do we control here in Montpelier to make a difference.
Kevin and then Sean.
This may be a ridiculous question, but if the Fed doesn't want the building anymore, do you have any idea of assume they're looking to sell it?
Yeah.
Any idea what it might be going for?
Like as a price, like the
Yeah.
value?
No guess.
No, I mean,
Sure.
I feel like it's appraised at something like 4 million or something like that. But, honestly, our understanding from other places is that sometimes negotiated sale that theoretically can be they can arrive at a sale price that is below market rate.
Right.
Sometimes you're actually better off. You negotiate, you don't get an outcome you like. The auction price often tends to actually come in lower than whatever that negotiated sale price is. So that's one of the calculations we would have to make.
Right.
I mean, the other thing I would say about generally when we think about GSA and these processes, we think of it's going to take too long. It's going to be years before they make any decisions. We actually have the opposite concern at this point, which is given the current administration and leadership at GSA, they are very motivated to offload these buildings. And so we actually have some work to do to get ready and figure out what the possibilities are there. And so, yeah.
Sean?
These people have painfully heard this way too many times, but I moved here in 1971 to Montpelier. So
I thought you grew up here.
I grew up here, but no, I moved here.
Who's a youngster?
And I always felt that the river was something that no one wanted to deal with. Still to this day. That it's this beautiful thing in the middle of the town that everyone tries their best to kind of either hide or act like it's not there. And this, like page 18 on the capital plan,
Yeah.
is brilliant. And it's something that we could I can't get over that we haven't gone there, but I know that there's a lot of problems with that. But it's exciting to see something like this, even though it's 25 years old. So,
Yeah, I grew up in Brattleboro and it's a similar dynamic.
Fort and Springfield.
You've got Springfield, all of these Vermont communities, right, where you have this river and Brattleboro turns its back to that river.
Yeah.
You don't even know the Connecticut's there.
Mhm.
And yet there's so much opportunity in facing. And in fact, you see it around the country. Greenville, South Carolina, where my mom grew up,
Mhm.
they figured out how to just embrace that river and create all these markets along that river. And it's become such an asset for that community.
yeah, I wish there were walkways and that people enjoyed it. And, even if the floodwaters came over the walkways, you design them so that they can be underwater for a couple of days or whatever. But I don't know. I'll do what I can. You got my support. That's for sure. So.
We appreciate that.
That's it. So would there be a possibility of having where the post office building, the federal building is, and then all the way to the old Thrush, having that as a TIF district? Would that be, because you wouldn't be able to do it with a capital complex, but to come, that whole area. It's probably too late in the process, maybe. Maybe the city wouldn't want it. I just don't know if that would help at all.
I think it would, without question, help. And I think if we were to talk about if there was some kind of redevelopment there, I think actually a TIF district would almost, just speaking for myself,
Yeah.
but like, I think it'd almost be a requirement. Like, I don't know how a project like that gets done without.
You just have to find a developer that hasn't worked with the city before to be the lead person for that development.
You know, if I could just say one other quick thing, I just feel like I just want to thank you all for your leadership during a really difficult time for a variety of reasons. But I really do feel like as this, you know, as someone, my kids are born here, I'm gonna die here, like this is a pivotal moment in the history of Montpelier, like generational moment. And I'm really glad for the experienced leadership that's here to help shape what happens, because it'll have profound implications for our community and for the state. No pressure.
We're all over it.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah, a good example of that is learning from the experience of Waterbury around the state complex there, right? That, how long that took, what it looked like to engage, really learning from your experience on that is tremendously helpful.
It was a long process, but you know what? It wasn't that long. You know, within 2 or 3 years, within 2 years, we knew what we were doing. Really, or a year and a half. We knew what we were doing. It's pretty quick. This one's taken longer. You know, it's been a year and a half going on 2 this summer. We still don't know, but with Waterbury in 2 years, we're breaking ground. We knew what we were doing. So this one's gonna take longer. Plus, the buildings aren't connected so much.
Mhm.
I don't know. Other questions? Thoughts? So keep us in the loop, and if there's anything that we can do to help,
We will certainly.
let us know. And I'm glad that you came along on the tour. It was really helpful. And I do remember seeing a lot of Ben Dole signs
Oh, yeah.
up on Terrace Street. I said, who is this guy?
Funny thing is, he was unopposed and he still had all his eyes.
I was running against apathy.
Because I live further up Terrace Street. So, anyway.
We really appreciate the invitation to come in. We really.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate it. But keep us in the loop.
Thank you.
Connor will keep you in the loop.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we're a little ahead of schedule, but that's all well and good. Do you want to go on, Sean? Talk about your,
Sure, I can. For you guys for 15 minutes.
we got Cole here. He can get the gist of what your plan is.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
I figured to see this big.
It's a upright thing behind you.
Take your time, John, because I want to see it.
It's been erected.
Are we going online still?
Yeah, we're live.
Shows your fun.
Who's online?
I didn't even think about it. I just,
Yeah.
I got after it.
Tell.
Yeah, I did not. It's my first.
Who's on the?
It's lucky it's spelled right, I hope.
You really want to sit up in that hot seat?
Oh, yeah.
Why not? I mean, I can sit over there. Where do you want me to sit?
Wherever you want.
There. Sit there. It's a
Sit there.
fascinating experience.
Yeah.
And look right at me.
It's like reporting your bill on the floor.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh, you got some great pictures.
Well, you know, I tried.
I have one that I sent him that he didn't put in there.
Yeah, I didn't.
I'm gonna share with you.
You,
That'll be chapter.
Troy has his own, has a, you know, sub chapter that he can share with you after.
Gary, I had a preliminary quip, but a consideration of your proximity to me, I'm just gonna keep it to myself.
It's all yours, Sean.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh.
On Sweeney, Chittenden 7. All right, so let's get after this. And this is, you know, what's kind of been great about this is it's been I've gotten a lot of input, a lot of input from everyone on the committee, which I've really enjoyed. It's been a great process, and I'm gonna I'm going to take you on a little trip through my mind and how I address
Hold on.
things with design build, because that's what I see this as. It's almost like a design build thing. So okay, so
Kind of like conservation.
exactly. So the Bennington Battle Monument, how do we save
I
it?
did a PowerPoint when he did my kid.
It's my first one. How do we save it while making a sound long-term investment with Vermont taxpayer dollars? Next slide. So, a proposed $40 million project to restore the monument. But my issue, how could we invest all of that money and then watch the same thing happen in 30 years? If you remember, towards the end of that presentation, I asked them, after the money that was spent, how it wouldn't happen again. And they all said it would happen again. So then we're looking at another, I don't know, 40 or 50 or $60 million, 30 or 40 years from now, we're doing the same thing. I just don't see that as a good way to spend taxpayer dollars. I spoke to my mason this past weekend, Pete Wells, great guy. I've been working with him for 25 years. And I asked him, I said, is there anything you can do to limestone to seal it? He goes, you could put stuff on it, but it's not going to seal the water out of it because it's so porous, the water's going to get back into it. So, I just, it's spinning through my head. So, this is where, to me, that plan, the $40 million is not fiscally responsible. I want to make that really clear. And that's what drove me to keep thinking about this and keep thinking about other solutions. Next slide. My first thought was to knock it down. And this is harsh, I get it. But it's also the way I think, even with people's houses. I sometimes think, is it better to start over? Is it better to do that? And what if we just reimagined the monument in a more affordable way? Next slide. So, do we use the stone to turn the park into something like Versailles Orangerie, which I have been fortunate enough to be there. And, do we reuse the stone, make it some really beautiful park up there? But I didn't really think that captured the essence of the monument or the battle. It doesn't really scream Vermont either, So next slide. Then I remembered seeing the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. when I was there. And I don't know if you guys know this, but I was part of the crew, this team that got the Big Joe Burrell statue built on Church Street. Big Joe played at my bar many times. He played at my wedding. And we got that statue made for about 150 grand. So I'm thinking to myself, can we put Vermont artists to work and build some statues out there? Why not? That could be an affordable way to go and capture a British, American soldiers fighting out, whatever it was, 20 miles away. Next slide. But I ran that by Representative Greer and Representative Morrissey, and they told me so many nice things about how the folks in Bennington love the monument. They love to see it throughout the year. They use it as a landmark. It's just part of who they are. It's part of the landscape. It's part of Bennington. So the knocking it down got put on, back burner. So next slide. So a couple of weeks ago, I'm sitting there watching TV at home, and a PBS special comes on that Ken Burns made about the Statue of Liberty. And I'm sitting there watching. It was fascinating. There's the mold they did out of plaster, and then they would wrap that mold with copper and build the structure behind it. They that's actually a picture of her when she made it to, to be perfectly upfront. Was in actually New York because it was there while they were still making the monument. Anyway, but what got me thinking about it is that they molded it out of copper to create the statue. The copper being the most important thing to me with trying to solve this problem. So next slide. So they built the statue. They erected her in Paris. They made sure she was all together. They got it all. They got and it was built right downtown. And then they disassembled it. Next picture. There was 350 pieces, and this is kind of important for where I'm kind of going with this. They had 350 pieces of the statue, and it was shipped in 214 crates from Paris to New York Harbor. So next slide. Meanwhile, while that was being done, here in America, out in New York Harbor, there was a crew of people building the base to this thing. And I'm just sharing this with you because it was kind of how I came to this. So next slide. So after arrival, they built the structural frame. You can see it in there. That's like that's just a frame that they would then crane the pieces up to. And it got me thinking. And they installed all 350 pieces. They built a symbol of freedom that we all cherish today. And by the way, from the base to the torch of the Statue of Liberty, it's 306 feet high.
Same height as a monument.
Bingo. Just keep that in mind for future marketing ideas. So next slide. So why am I doing this? Why do I tell you all this? Well, I started thinking to myself, why don't we just build a brand new Bennington Battle Monument the same way? Why don't we knock it down? Why don't we build the structure So next slide. And this is an old blueprint that I found online, and this is how they kind of drew it out. And I was thinking to myself, man, this could be it. But I went back to, I don't want to knock the thing down. That's not the point. We don't want to knock it down. Then I had an idea, a better idea, a more affordable idea. Next slide. So the monument, stunning. Don't want to knock it down. Drying it out for years with a plastic cover on it. This is where your slide could come in handy. And letting it get waterlogged again 30 years hence or less, to me, is not the answer with Vermont taxpayer dollars. So I came up with something pretty simple, and I built a model. Cole, you want to hand that to me, please?
Oh.
And what was kind of great about the model, you can just hand me those separately. Yeah, I only need a couple of them. So I did this because I'm in design build, and I got to see things kind of like, out in the, I got to wrap my head around it. I was like, okay, so we got the Bennington Battle Monument. How do we save it with with this Statue of Liberty thing happening? So I made out of just this was actually some, hi. Thanks for joining us. After thinking about it in my house, I was like, okay, why don't we make a structure that's a stainless steel frame around it that won't rot? Because remember, we have the 660,000 gallons of water inside of this that are going to need to come out eventually. So then, thinking like the Statue of Liberty, they had big pieces. I'm thinking we build big framed pieces somewhere in Bennington in a warehouse. This structural frame gets built, and I have better pictures to show you, but this is just my thinking. And the frame would probably have to get built there on site by hand. But I don't think they would need to, because it's an obelisk. This is not an obelisk, but it is. we could pressure frame it on there. So it could just be kind of like the steel frame that wraps around it. And it may have to be stainless because we don't want it to rot. You don't want to put something in there that's going to have all that water coming out of it here. So I'm thinking we put that there, and then big cranes, we don't have to build any more staging, but big cranes bring in these big pieces that are pre-done of copper. This is copper I had at my house. And we start putting this thing together and you build it up. This is probably going to fall. But anyway, I'm thinking we build this together and it goes pretty quick. But I think it doesn't have to take years and years. Remember what they said, they were going to put the plastic thing over this and it was going to take 3 or 4 years just to dry it out.
You'll have a picture of that plastic thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I see it.
Good. So anyway, I shared this with Representative Casey and Representative Hedrick, and this is where Troy kicked in. And it was great because I hadn't gone there. And Representative Hedrick got really creative.
That's trouble.
So next slide.
Another love.
So then he was probably kidding, but he sent me this rendering and it's rather spot on. You know, it's a little rough up there. It's not very clear, but we build a frame around the thing and being careful to, you have the openings and you leave the thing accessible. And, anyway, go to the next slide.
Is that done prior to drying it out? or
No.
after?
I don't care about the water. I'm going to assume the water, and I'm not assuming, I know through the science of building that water, if you give water a place to go, it'll find its way out. And through this, when this is built, that to me, what'll end up happening is that what's really brilliant about this that Troy said is that a person could crawl up inside of there and either repoint it or get access to the stone. But it also will create a way through convection, because everything in Vermont, every building you build has to allow for moisture to get out of it. And this would have venting through here. And I almost see like little staging. So a person could crawl up there and get out on the staging and work on it. Either turn around and work on the coating that we're going to put on or the stone on the inside. So I kind of feel like it's this really brilliant, safe thing that we build. The only thing that I have to find out, and I haven't had a chance to talk to an engineer yet, is do we have fan system in the top of the structure that will help pull the moisture up and out? And there would be vents created, like I'm not there yet with the design, but that would allow the water to get out and the moisture to get out. So anyway, next slide, Phil. So there you go. There it is, kind of loosely done. I would say that you could build the frame in 6 months. I think you could wrap the thing in copper in 6 months, especially if it was done off-site and brought on with crane work. Like I showed you with this, there's a possibility of building it in panels, which would go pretty quick. And then you're putting those panels together in an enclosed environment, which would make it easier and faster and cheaper, and bringing those there. And then, I did some quick math, and I did on the obelisk, it's about 40,000 square feet that you have to cover. Probably a little less, but I kind of estimated it at like 40,000 square feet, which is in my building world, you go by that, you break it into 10 by 10 squares. So you refer to that as a square. So there's 400 square. And I asked my copper roofing guy on Saturday what he would charge for copper roofing, paneled, soldered. He said about $5,000 a square. So $5,000 a square times $400 is $2 million. Just for fun, I talked to my guy down at Burlington Metalworks, Joe. Been working with him for 25 years. And I asked him about this. And I said, you know, if we were to build something, a structure around this guy, 300 feet high, you have to do 4 sides. I said, what if I put like $2 million in there for that? He goes, probably not a bad estimate. So we're at $4 to $5 million for the project cost. Now, that's more a Sweeney Design Build or a kind of a layperson's work. So I kind of thought, let's just double it to be safe. So we're at an $8 to $10 million cost for the whole thing. Now, I might be a little off on that. I don't know. I'm not really sure, but those are real numbers from guys that I work with. And I'm thinking that this almost gets done by a Vermont roofing company, because I look at it as more of roofing going on, even though it's going on, you know, very, very vertically. So, and over time, and I'll get to that in another slide, in the next slide. Well, might as well go to that now then. Yeah, go to the next slide. I'm assuming that there's a pretty big heat pump system that we heat the inside of this thing with and cool it. Because in the summer, for the first 5, 6, 10 years, it's going to be pretty moist in there. So if we have a heat pump system in there that actually has dehumidification qualities, in which it does, any heat pump system dehumidifies. It's something that I think we can do right away. Now, I also have on there an elevator. I don't think you do that until you get a new elevator. You don't get that in there until you get your moisture levels down to a reasonable way. I don't think you want to spend $1 million on a new elevator that then turns into rust and it's a mess like the one is now there. So I say we get a few more years out of the elevators that's there. And then the next slide is a shot of the stainless steel stair from Hubbard Park, the tower right above here that I used to crawl up as a kid. And we also have to put money aside to put a stairway on the inside of it, because that stairway is rusty. That's in it now, and it's a mess. So next slide. So I also think that, I understand. I know it's going to be it's going to be a leap for some people to think about covering up this stone monolith that they've seen for all these years. But I think, so when people build straw bale houses, they do truth windows. It's something that, it's a little hippie, but it's something that a lot of people do, and just to prove that the inside of it has what it's built out of. I say we do some truth windows at the base of this, so people on the outside can look at it and say, oh, there's the old stone that used to be there. We don't cover it up totally. We embrace it. And then visitors could see that. But remember, next slide, you would always be able to see the original stone from the interior. Yes, we cover the outside, and I also think, looking at some of the pictures of the inside of it, I think it would be just a suggestion to do better lighting in there. I think that you could really highlight some of that original stone, and you would still be able to see it. That's the old cauldron that got stolen. That cauldron's from the British, and the American soldiers took it from them. So that's why I think it still sits in there. And that's the observation deck, the one over here. So you'd still be able to see all the stone. You'd still be able to touch it and feel it. But to me, so anyway, last picture. Eventually, the copper would patina like the Statue of Liberty. In the end, we have spent less. We restored a monument in a creative way, and we now have something to promote as a new, old, historic site. And it could be marketed around the world. Okay, it can be marketed just in this country, but just think that we could make it 307 feet. We would be able to get it a little taller, so we could say it was a little taller than the Statue of Liberty. But an approximate, but the way I've looked at this is that, I'm looking at a $10 or $12 million budget that will last. My guess is it'll last 100 years, probably more. Statue of Liberty's looking pretty good after 175 years. And it's better than spending 40 million. That's only going to last 30 years. And that math done in public works to me.
But Swaney, you don't have the safety fencing in there.
That's gone. So that's my presentation. Thanks everyone for listening. Any questions? Happy to answer. Go ahead.
This is totally in the minutia, but have you thought about the galvanic action between the stainless steel and the copper?
Well, that's what I have to get. We have to, get an engineer to talk about what material to use.
Yeah.
But there is a material to use, whether there's a rubber bumper that gets put in between that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's standoff. I do not want to drill into the stone. I want to put this, when I was talking about like this, I really want a compression, like weld it, fit it on there. So we're not messing with the stone at all. I don't want to attach it to that because it'll be so massive and so heavy. It's not going to need to be, it's not going to fly off.
Right.
So, but I also know all that moisture that's going to be between the stone and the copper. We've got to that needs to be dealt with on some level. And I'm not sure if it's just fans, if it's convection that's saving it, but that's my, I'm sure we can figure that. That's not a big hurdle. So anyway.
Does it have to be copper on the outside?
It doesn't. I was just, I know that, copper is, I don't want it to be vinyl siding, that's for sure, and, I kind of feel like I saw copper as being something that would last a long time. There's also because I forgot to show you this because this was I forgot to put this on, but sorry. But it would end up being brown for a long time. The monument would end up being brown, because that's what copper goes brown for a long time before it goes to patina. And you can see a picture of the Statue of Liberty. It was brown for 75 years, 100 years, then it started to patina. But it could be a different material, sure. I just know that copper lasts a long time outside it moves with the solder. It's a really wonderful material that just is like that. It's a reasonable thing. Does that bother you at being brown or?
I just don't know how the public would react and having it all copper, I'm just thinking color, but also be pretty shiny.
Yeah. At first, it would take months. If you ever seen a copper roof go on, it's months.
Yeah, there's one on campus. It was almost immediate.
It happens fast. It would be kind of fun for a couple of months. Then it would be this. And then it would take a while for it to, I feel that this is a reasonable cost and we can save it rather than talking about the 40 million or 80 million. That's never going to happen.
So you would still go through the phase of drying it out?
Well, what would happen, and once you get the heat pump in here, it would start to dry naturally over time, and then it would get dry, and then it would be dry. But there's no reality where if you don't cover that limestone up, that it doesn't get wet again. It'll continue to get wet, and then you got the same problem again. So I just don't see how anybody would be on board with that. I can't be. Not especially with.
I'll bet you the copper itself won't dry it out because you're gonna create so much heat in there.
Sure. On a sunny day, it's gonna be like, so those are gonna be steam coming off the top of it. And that all has to be designed in. I'm not an engineer. I know where to find them. Yeah. There you go.
How would you, when that skin develops a leak, how would you diagnose it?
I think that you would probably have monthly checks. A guy would go up inside or a woman would go up inside and they'd go up with a safety harness and they would look around. I think I think that you would know, and that because of the structure that we have inside of it would be easy to access.
But you'd be able to go in between here.
Yes. Yep. That was Troy's idea. I cannot take credit for that. When he sent me that shot of it 2 or 3 feet in there, I thought that's brilliant because it allows you to be able to work on it forever. And you probably could put a pulley system in there. So you have like a mountain climbing thing. So it would be safe for the person inside. You'd have that all tied off and worked into the structure into the frame.
You're saying between where the monument is now and the new casing would be about 3 feet.
Maybe, but we'd have to run, this is where an engineer has to help us with the water, the moisture coming out. And it may have to be a little thinner. I'm not sure, but we want that moisture to go out and away from it. And it would naturally, especially running the heat on the inside of this year round. And then I just think that it would just make it a lot more comfortable and it would be a year-round structure. Is it open in the winter right now?
No,
No. So,
That makes it, yeah,
so anyway, so that's it, people. That's all I got.
How do you think the Bennington would react to something like this?
none of you went through the lighting of,
That was hard.
that was a challenge at best, change for people is hard, but I, like I asked even Laura Trishman and the engineer, how did they come up with the 40 million here? Being that all the engineering and that studies had not been done. And I also asked, how do you dry it out and then keep it dry? There weren't answers quite yet. This is a proposal. I'm very appreciative of you taking the time and the concern of saving this, because I have to tell you, if it was even thought of to be taken down or to be somehow something else, we'd probably have a World War III. I mean, this is kind of like Bennington's symbol, but it's actually the whole region's symbol. It actually is Vermont symbol. I mean, when we're compared to like the Washington Monument in Washington, that's significant. And we are, I think, most matched with the State House as far as visitors. So it does have a draw and an interest with the history. But again, our folks in town so I am appreciative that there's another thought and idea and at a lower cost. Because, the 40 million, we were trying to say, would be many things would have to do to even think about getting to those numbers. And of course, with what's presently going on in Washington, it's not likely that anything could step up in the near future. And we've got to do something to at least be getting the water out of it right now, and then have the plan in place to do something to preserve it for the next 100 years. Thank you.
Well,
I was just gonna say, I mean, yes, it is a worthy proposal to discuss, I guess. I guess for me, a lot of people use it for, our police department uses it on their badges. I know that the college incorporates it into things. I know other, like Mary said, our county, it's a symbol for the whole region. I guess I would first want to see more exploration into different kinds of stones that look very similar, because I mean, even the color itself's kind of distinct, and I feel like changing it to such a major. I don't disagree with the trying to keep it long-term preserved, because I think that's part of the problem. We don't want to keep going through this process. We want to, and if that means going to a different kind of stone that's maybe a different shade of gray, I think people would be more open to that. But I feel like that's just going to be a tough pill to swallow, even for me. I mean, because when I drive down my road all the way in North Bennington, like 4 or 5 miles away, what do I see in the distance? That monument. So it's just like it would just be a huge change. And
Well, even when we're coming in from Montpelier on a Friday, first thing you see is, I have to tell you, I'm not meaning to get emotional, but you drive into the town, and after we had it lit, you see the monument just kind of gracefully glowing there. And, you know, the brown color would, I think, be a significant challenge for our folks. I don't know if there's another material or something that could be considered, but it will be a tough nut to crack.
I do not have really, you know, all I'm trying to get going is a more affordable approach to fixing.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
we're very.
I don't really like, you know, the chances of this happening are slim to none. But I just wanted to see them try to do that and then keep spending that kind of money year after year or every whatever just doesn't seem realistic. So I'm trying to come up with something that would save it and still give it something that people would be proud of and could love. But I get it's going to be it's a tough sell.
Yeah.
I got it.
Not to be negative, but the 40 million is an old number. So it could be
Higher.
60 to 80 million.
Well,
And then
Right.
that might, I mean, there's plenty of people that would say don't want to spend 40 million, much less 60 or 80 million. So
I could do a takeoff, I think, do some math really quick. But stone, a mason, charges about $55 a square foot. So do the 40, what's 55 times 40,000 square feet? Do that math quick and you'll know what it would cost to wrap that. Are you talking about
A little over
putting-
2 mil, in my head, a little over 2 mil.
maybe?
Yeah.
Then that's like, maybe we do that. Maybe we put stone across that could do it too. I just don't know how you deal with the moisture then.
It's good to have different options.
Right.
And, you know, I won't go, I mean, I was just, you know, I guess the other point I had was, goodness. Oh, about, and I think this would be something would be worth, you know, considering as a community, feel like in this committee is if we were to change it, I'm just gonna say hypothetically to what you presented here today, would that potentially draw more tourism, which in turn would help our, so it's like, that's, I would love to wait, because maybe it's more unique having it as a copper monument. I'm just
Listen,
that's
that's-
hypothetical.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think that would be, it again, still would be a tough pill to swallow, because, you know, Mary said, when we come back down, I mean, anytime I come back from Albany from the airport, you know, you see it there and you know you're home, and it's, you
Right.
know.
But just think, you're 22.
Yeah.
You'll be thinking of,
Oh,
that's copper. You'll think of me every time you see it.
yeah.
And we'll go, that Sean.
That
Yeah,
Sweeney.
but that's, I just wanted to add that perspective because I think that.
And that's stuff that we have to talk to people about. That's,
Yeah.
I didn't think, I mean, I just wanted, my brain was like, how can we do this? How can we save it? Still make it look beautiful. Still make it something that attracts people, maybe make it even a little nicer. That's all I was trying to do.
We're very appreciative.
Yeah, and keep the conversation
Yeah.
rolling.
perfect.
Because I'll admit, if it were shiny, I had someone that I saw in Manchester. I had someone that I saw in Manchester walking around. And I said, I was like, would you drive through Bennington on your way up? And they said, yeah. And I was like, would you stop off and see anything? They're like, there wasn't really anything. I said, yeah, I mean, you didn't see the monument? They're like, there was a monument? And I was like, how did you miss that? I was like, you must not have been paying attention. But so.
Well, I have to tell you, if it was shiny, we'd be in meetings for the rest of our life.
It wouldn't be shiny for long.
Because
It
even
would
with-
be just that summer.
even with the gentle lighting that RPI did that was very beautifully done, they'd be like, do you see how bright that is? And it wasn't bright at all. The streetlights that are historically lined down the road were bright. And I said to some of the folks that were adamant that, you know, we weren't having the lighting, and she said, do you see how bright that is? And I said to she and her husband very politely, I said, could you turn around? And they looked at this lamp, which was a historic lamp, which was about 100 times brighter on the street than the whole monument lit. And she said, oh. So it's like,
Go ahead. It's your town.
Just because we're talking about
Yeah.
copper
Yeah.
is the hypothetical.
Yeah.
I know there could be a range of different options. How does copper turn from that very, very shiny stage to the brown stage you're discussing? Does that take an act of sunlight? Is that moisture?
I think it's mostly the acids in the rain that turn it. That's what happens with it pretty quickly. There's just things in the
Okay.
rain
And
naturally that knock it down.
probably
really fast.
actually,
There's some good
heat-
YouTube videos.
probably actually the heat, because think of a copper pan you have that goes on a stovetop even.
Yeah,
That-
it doesn't take long.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say 3-4 months
Well-
done brown.
Well, I was just gonna say again, as a hypothetical, if that were a way we would go, I just wouldn't know if it would make sense to almost in a way box it up so it isn't shining everywhere and
Right.
people, I mean, because that could
well,
really.
the other issues, we've got the airport right
Right.
down the
Right.
road, and they would not allow that for aviation reasons
Yeah.
if it was bright.
I mean, those panels could be put outside too. While
Prior.
we could start building them first, put them outside, let them sit out there and let them age. They will age.
Yes.
All this copper I brought was from my house.
Right.
And I have copper on the bottom of my house. It covers up some insulation and it got brown like the first summer.
But that's a good point, laying it out. and letting-
Yeah, we could age it. It could get aged easily.
I know.
Yeah, Sean, I just want to say, I obviously find some humor in this proposal, but with my middle school brain, but I don't want to detract from the idea that like, you put a lot of thought into this and you took into consideration the cost, sort of the culture of the community. And I think it's coming from a very genuine place where you don't want to see a rubble of rocks on the ground here. So like to me, this is citizen legislature at its best, people bringing their skills to this building here. And prior to this, the only choice we had was the choice on the spreadsheet. Now, I think you've introduced a conversation to this where maybe this isn't the option, but we can talk about variations of this option too. So, really hats off, Sean. I think that's huge.
And thanks for giving me the time to share this with you.
Been
So,
mulling this over for a few months.
yeah.
I will say if Sweeney Construction gets this contract.
No, but it's a steel framing company and maybe a really, like, I'm trying to keep it local too. Hopefully we can hire Vermonters to do it. Like not to have it go out of state, and I think that they have the capabilities of doing it. So anyway.
It's a good starting point, I think, what Ron said. It really makes you think out of the box a little bit. And I really appreciate what you did, Sean. It's really brings a different
Very much.
dynamic
Thank
to the
you.
conversation.
What would be the possibility instead of copper going with aluminum? Like steel roof?
You could do aluminum. I mean, that's a silver and that doesn't ever really,
It could be colored though.
Right.
Just like a.
That's true.
Aluminum roof, you could. go-
then you're having to paint it every so often, it doesn't hold the paint. Any aluminum roof that's out there 7,500 years, it starts to get funky and it will eventually start to kind of corrode. Whereas copper just holds up really well. I mean, look at the statue.
Well, it has the depth. You start putting paint to it and it gets shiny.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, it's a general thing. We're not solving the problem today of like,
No,
we can open a conversation of there's a lot of different potentials.
that's all I'm trying to do.
As you mentioned,
Yeah.
but we could sit here all day and say, well, what about this material? What about that material? And no matter what any of us think, it's not going to be that material.
Yeah.
We'll get, like you said, engineers and other people. So just not for you, but everybody else, keep that in mind. Like this is a conversation starter.
Yeah, but copper has a tone. If it was my building, that's what I would do to it.
Yep.
I wouldn't even, because copper is beautiful. When it gets brown, and when it gets shady, it's gorgeous and it lasts for a long time. So that's why, it's natural.
Yeah, I would just be curious to see some samples of it browning that way, just
We
to.
can work on that.
Well, I would just be curious to see it because, I personally don't know how I would describe it to people because I'm sure that this conversation that's happening right now, it's gonna probably enter the public domain.
It might.
And we'll probably be getting a lot of questions and comments and
It's
concerns.
dull. It's not shiny. When it turns, when it starts to age, it gets to be a not shiny brown, a dull brown. So it's not reflective. So it's kind of, which is kind of nice.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
anyway, but I can get you I'll get you a sample.
The historic preservation people, didn't they do a rendering of something?
Well, they did in the presentation, but I don't remember. what
Maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't the monument, but it's another project
Mhm.
where they said, this is what it looks like right now. This is what it's gonna look like when we're all done. I wonder if they could do some samplings of that for the monument based on different kinds of materials that could potentially be used.
Uh-huh.
But maybe that may be too early in the process, but just.
And there are things you can do to age the copper to make it look patina. There's acids that you can put on it. There are things you can do to it. I don't know if I would do that, but go ahead.
We're gonna take a quick.
Yeah, okay.
So, but how do we keep the conversation going? And how do we get Laura and the engineers here to have them even see this or see the presentation? To say, oh my gosh, we never thought of something like that. Because I think they're focused pretty much on the one, and again, that's their job to do that, but I think giving some other thoughts or ideas of how do we look to kind of keep the discussion going?
Well, that was what I was sitting here thinking, and I think it would behoove us to have a few people with Sean to talk with Laura, to have that same presentation to Laura and BGS at the same time. And see what, just put the thought, plant the seed, talk with them, see if they'd be open to it. I think that's really the next step. It won't be doing it in the form of a committee meeting. It'd really be Sean with one or two other
Right,
folks.
because when I did ask about other things to look at, how they could do it, they really didn't have another thought or ideas to, it's kind of the one way.
I think this would be good to present to them, and that's what I was thinking, wondering what's the best way.
It's up to you. I'm happy to do it again and not to, bore you guys with it, but I'm happy to meet with them and maybe even like this summer when we're not here or whatever. I'm happy to, keep that conversation going.
Well, thank you, Sean.
You will.
Very
Thank
much,
you.
thank you.
Just one more comment to add on to, bringing Laura and them into this conversation. This would just be a recommendation, but could we potentially bring in the folks that are at the monument that might have some more, or would that be later?
That's a little too early.
Later, okay.
Be a little
Just-
too early.
Yeah. Again, thank you for humoring me.
Yeah.
I appreciate
I
it.
didn't
Yeah.
humor
Thanks so
you.
much.
I
Yeah.
think
That was
good.
fabulous.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you, Sean.
I'll get off the hot seat.
Yeah, come back where you belong.
What happened to your?
Get back over.
Over your shelf over there? Yeah.
So why don't, we've been here for an hour and a half.